Section 9. Groupings inside the Polish nomenklatura in 1960s. The essence of political life in a Stalinist country comes down to the struggle between various factions of the nomenklatura. Among the Polish nomenklatura in the 1960s, there were three main groups. Quote, the first group united around former members of the Politburo of the Central Committee of the PZPR, Zombrowski and Staszewski. Its supporters were one-time members of the Communist Party of Poland, who were in the USSR during the war, and after its end returned to the country and occupied various positions, including high party and government positions. Mostly these were Poles of Jewish origin. Quote, the second group is the so-called partisans, whose leader was then Minister of Internal Affairs Morchar. During the war, they fought with arms in their hands against the German occupiers and then with the right underground. However, power in the country ended up in the hands of those who came from the Soviet Union. They were better prepared for this role and had more confidence from the Big Brother. And another quote. The third group was known as the Katowice Group, named after the capital of the Silesian voivodeship, Katowice. Its leader was Gierek, the first secretary of the voivodeship committee of the PZPR. The voivodeship established its own rules, somewhat different from others, for which the people nicknamed Katowice Katanga. It was characterized by a high level of industrial development, greater economic efficiency, modern approaches to management, etc. In this region, the authorities paid more attention to the growth of population consumption and housing construction. The voivodeship organization of PZPR was the most numerous and effective in its work. The party committee was dominated by a strict hierarchy and discipline. Gierek's working style was characterized by openness to people. Years of living in the West, before and during the war, made him unlike both Polish and Soviet party leaders. As a result, he was known as a socialist technocrat and a good manager. Note that the experience of living in the West reflects well on the abilities of the future leader of Poland. Section 10. Crisis in the epoch of Gomulka, 1956-1970. In Stalinist states, decisions are most often made by one person, the top management, from whom the decision is communicated to everyone else. Such a person experiences pressure from various opposing social interests, and therefore his decisions are often contradictory. After Beerut's death in 1956 and until 1970, Poland was ruled by Gomulka. Here is what the monograph Poland in the 20th Century writes about his rule. Quote, all power was concentrated in the hands of the so-called narrow leadership. Meetings of the Politburo of the Central Committee of the PZPR were held rarely and irregularly. The Secretariat of the Central Committee practically did not meet. The decisions of the Politburo were mechanically brought to the attention of other government bodies. with such a decision-making mechanism. 1. There is no feedback from people who are directly affected by this or that issue. 2. There is no opportunity to consider alternative solutions to problems. 3. People who are responsible for executing decisions feel that their opinions do not matter. Let us remember that Joseph Stalin defined the requirements for nomenklatura in the following words: people who know how to implement directives, who can understand directives, who can accept directives as if they were their own, and who know how to implement them. Wikipedia. 4. Political life of the country is becoming more and more formalized because there is no real discussion of issues. Society is driven into a dead end. The way out of this is only possible through underground activities in whatever sphere. As a result of this system of government, an economic crisis is growing in the country. In an attempt to resolve it, the Soviet nomenklatura turns the general secretary of the Polish party into a scapegoat and removes him from power. It happens like this. On December 11, 1970, at a meeting of the Politburo of the Central Committee of the PZPR, a plan for, quote, regulating prices and the wage system, end of quote, was approved. As a result, the increase in food prices came at the most inopportune time, before Christmas. The first secretary of the Central Committee imposed on the majority of the members of Politburo a prepared decision. Unexpectedly announced on the radio on December 12, 1970, an increase in prices for basic food products, meat and meat products, on average by 17%, pasta 15%, fish products 11%, flour 16%, and others. The average price increase was 15%, caused a wave of discontent in the country. As a result, quote, already on December 14th, 3,000 workers of the Lenin shipyard went on strike, demanding the cancellation of the price increase. Since the management of the enterprise could not fulfill their demands, they formed a column and headed to the building of the Voivodeship Committee of the PZPR. The workers sang patriotic, religious, and revolutionary songs, including the International and March of the Ludova Guard, demanding a meeting with the first secretary of the Voivodeship Committee of the party, Karkoshka. On December 15th, near the police building, clashes became violent. The first casualties appeared. Several of the most aggressive people from the 20,000-strong crowd set fire to the building of the Voivodeship Committee of the party, supported by joyful cries. The Soviet ambassador to Poland met with Gomulka. In the report of the meeting, the Soviet ambassador wrote about Gomulka's poor condition. He is sick, moves with difficulty, speaks with effort, emphasizes the need to deal with demonstrators, stated that in view of the threat to socialism and in connection with the unbridled street crowd, the Polish leadership issued an order to use weapons. On December 18, 1917, the Politburo of the CPSU Central Committee sent a letter to the Politburo of the PZPR Central Committee in which the Soviet leadership, in essence, spoke out against the use of force against Polish workers in favor of a political resolution of the crisis. In practice, this meant that Kremlin refused Gomulka political trust. End of quote. This incident once again demonstrates that the real levers of control in Poland were in Moscow. On December the 20th, Edward Gierek was selected and in fact appointed by Moscow to the post of First Secretary. However, according to one source, Gierek was the successor whom Gomulka himself found for himself. Quote, in January 1981, during a meeting with Verblan, Gomulka admitted that he had actually nominated Gierek to replace him, whom he had treated as an heir for a number of years. True, he then changed his mind, Gomulka said. I didn't see anyone better then. Only towards the end did I begin to take a closer look at the young people.